With the format currently being overrun with stuff like Dragapult, Gardevoir, Marnie's Grimmsnarl, all this kind of stuff, players have been trying to figure out a way or a deck that can counter these big threats in the format, and I believe we have found that deck. During the North American International Championship, there was one deck running around that was actually doing quite well, even getting into the top 8 of the event, and it wasn't Dragapult, it wasn't Gardevoir, it wasn't Marnie's Grimmsnarl, it was instead Toedscruel EX. Yes, this card made it into the top 8, and for very, very good reason. This card in the past, I don't think has seen any play whatsoever, but in our current format, it's actually a pretty good deck, and that's purely because of Toedscruel itself with its protection ability. I have no idea how you say the last name, Mycelium, I think that's how you say it, but this ability says prevent all effects of attacks used by your opponent's Pokemon done to all of your Pokemon that have an energy attached. Existing effects are not removed and damage is not an effect. So basically, any of your Pokemon that have an energy on them, basically a protection effect against effects of attacks. Now, what is an effect of an attack? Well, basically, the little text box underneath the attack, you know, you have the name of the attack, the energy, and then the damage. That text box underneath it, that is the effect of the attack. And basically, this card prevents a majority of those effects done to your Pokemon that have energy attached. So for example, take case of Dragapult. Dragapult's Phantom Dive says that you put 6 damage counters on your opponent's benched Pokemon in any way you like. Well, that's an effect of an attack, so they can't put those 6 damage counters on your Pokemon with energy attached. Well, they can, but when it comes to resolving that effect, nothing will happen. They can still put the damage counters on those Pokemon with energy attached, but at the end of the attack, it'll just fall off, like nothing will happen basically. Another example, Marnie's Grimmsnarl. Marnie's Grimmsnarl does 180 and then you do 30 damage to a benched Pokemon. You can still choose to do 30 damage to a Pokemon with an energy attached, they just won't take the damage. However, there are some effects that the deck doesn't stop. For example, Badoo. Because Badoo doesn't affect the Pokemon, it affects the player. It says your opponent can't play any item cards. It doesn't say your opponent's Pokemon can't play any item cards. So that effect still applies if you decide to use Badoo. Another example of an effective attack is in Roaring Moon. I know Roaring Moon doesn't see as much play anymore, but it did win a recent regional, so I might as well bring it up. Frenzied Gouging basically knocks out your opponent's active Pokemon. It does 200 damage to Roaring Moon. That is an effect of an attack. So your Pokemon won't be knocked out, but I believe Roaring Moon will still take 200 damage. Another example of an effect it doesn't stop is Iron Hands Amp You Very Much, which says that if your opponent's Pokemon is knocked out by damage from this attack, you take 1 more prize card. Or it doesn't say you, it just says take 1 more prize card. That is an effect of an attack, but it's not affecting the Pokemon, basically affecting the state of the game, I think. It's basically affecting you, the player, so that is something that it won't stop. But in terms of the stuff it does stop, the stuff it does stop is very, very strong. Dragapult can't spread around a bunch of damage as long as the Pokemon that it's targeting down have energy. Marnie's Grimmsnarl can't hit that 30 bench snipe. There's also some other cases, for example, Angelite from Sylveon EX, because EV Box is a pretty prevalent deck. Well, it's not prevalent, but it is a pretty strong deck. Angelite specifically says choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, shuffle those Pokemon and all cards attach them into the deck. So Angelite isn't affecting the Pokemon. You know, you choose 2 of your opponent's Pokemon and they shuffle them into the deck. That technically isn't an effect of an attack, so the Pokemon will still be shuffled back into the deck. It's hard to explain, and I'm sure somebody in the comments might be able to explain it better than me. It is an effect of an attack, but it's not an effect that is specifically like affecting the Pokemon. It's affecting the player, I guess, so on and so forth. There's some stuff that it does protect from and there's some stuff that it doesn't protect from. But the main question you may be thinking is, how are you supposed to get energy on all of your Pokemon in play? What do you play Toedscruel with? Well, the very obvious answer is Teal Mask, Ogerpon, Teal Dance, attach grass energy from your hand and draw a card. So basically you can just have a bunch of Teal Mask Ogerpons on the bench, attach an energy to them and draw some cards. Maybe use something like Energy Switch switch, so you can fulfill the 2 grass energy cost for Toedscruel's attack, which is a pretty good attack in of itself. Toedscruel's attack Colony Rush does 80 damage, and then an additional 40 more damage for each of your benched Pokemon that have a grass energy attached to them. And since Teal Mask Ogapon, just attaches a grass energy to itself anyway, with 4 of them in play, and they each have a grass energy attached, that's plus 160 damage. And then you can use something like Energy Switch to put it on another Pokemon, or you could maybe, manually attach to a different Pokemon and just get an energy on every single one of your Pokemon in play. And with stuff like Area 0 Underdepths, because Teal Mask Ogapon's a Terra Pokemon, you can have 8 bench slots. So 40 times 8 plus 80, that's a lot of damage. Plus, since we're playing, the Toedscruel line, we can make use of the other Toedscruel from Paradox Rift with its Slimy Mold Colony ability. It says cards in your opponent's discard pile can't be put into their hand by an effect of your opponent's abilities or trainer cards. Basically, your opponent can't put cards from the discard back into their hand, which is something that, a lot of people like to do with stuff like Superior Energy Retrieval and Normal Energy Retrieval, stuff like Night Stretcher so they can get Pokemon back that were knocked out. You can't do that anymore. You can still do something like Super Rod because it puts the card back into the deck, but you can't put cards back into your hand from the discard pile. Very, very strong lockdown effect. Very annoying to deal with. Very, very strong card. So why not throw it in? Plus, this deck is honestly very, very consistent because you can max out on copies of, Nest Balls, so you can get your Teal Mask Ogapons into play, Ultra Balls. There's also a Bug Catching set, which was released in Twilight Masquerade. It says look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and you can reveal 2 in any combination of Grass Pokemon and a basic Grass Energy, and put them into your hand. So you can just Bug Catching set, get a Teal Mask Ogapon and a Grass Energy, and then draw a card. And if you have another Bug Catching set, you can just do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and you pretty much play only all Grass Pokemon, except for other stuff like Fezandipiti, Mew EX, and Latias EX. The deck also doesn't really play a lot of supporter cards, mainly Professor's Research and Iono, because you just want to draw through your deck as quickly as possible, get a bunch of Grass Energy into play, basically protect all of your Pokemon, make sure a Grass Energy is on all of them, and just attack. And the deck has a pretty good matchup against most decks in the format. There was a pretty big gap at NAIC because the deck got 5th, it got top 8, and then the next one below that was 205th. But at the regional in Portland, it did get 12th. The deck has only recently started seeing play. It has seen a little bit of play over in Japan, I think, but it's only recently just started to be picked up over here, mainly because, the top decks in the format all rely on mainly their ability to use these effects of an attack. I think the reason it started seeing a lot more play recently is because everyone's picking up Marnie's Grimmsnarl. It's a cheap deck because it's, a Battle League deck or whatever they're called, so you can easily just pick it up for £30, $30, however much, add a couple of cards into it, and now you have a meta competitive deck. And Marnie's Grimmsnarl is weak to grass, so you can very easily just one-hit KO it with Teal Mask Ogapon because you can attack with it, or just Toedscruel. The only real kind of downside that the deck kind of has going into Marnie's Grimmsnarl is those Frostlasses, because they can just tick up damage over time and all that kind of stuff. And if you have Toedscruel, is that the name of the pre-evolution, that doesn't have an energy onto it, they can easily just snipe it down and all that kind of stuff. There's also Monkey Dory, so you can move around a bunch of damage. The deck has good matchups and it does have bad matchups. I think Dragapult's a really good matchup for the deck because, they can't spread around damage. They can't put 60 damage counters on your benched Pokemon that have Grass Energy onto them, or just any energy in general. And they're only doing 200 damage. Meanwhile, if you're able to get a Grass Energy on a bunch of benched Pokemon, you can very easily maybe take a one-hit KO. If not, then it is going to be a 2-hit KO, but that's fine. The deck going into stuff like Zoroark is pretty much just an instant win because it's weak to grass. Into Gardevoir, I'm not really sure how the deck structures. I think it does pretty well. I'm not entirely certain. Going into the future with this deck, I think it's still going to be pretty popular, especially with Marnie's Grimmsnarl being around. The deck has a pretty good counter against that. But looking into the mega sets, we are getting stuff like Venusaur EX, but I'm not really sure if that could fit into the deck. The card is pretty strong and it does have a pretty strong ability of being able to move Grass Energy as much as you want, but it's a stage 2, so it's going to take a bit of time to get into, but that ability is very, very strong, and its attack by itself is also pretty strong. I think people mainly wanted to use that deck as its own thing because you can bench Relicanth and then just Bulbasaur lock your opponent, because Bulbasaur has a 1 energy, you can't retreat next turn. Maybe people start splashing in something like Bulbasaur because it just removes the need for energy switch, though energy switch is still pretty powerful. But with something like Venusaur, Mega Venusaur EX, you can very easily just move energy onto all of your Pokemon, and now your bench is just protected from everything. Plus, if you need like a big end game attack, you can just throw all the energy onto itself and then just swing for a huge amount of damage, and also heal itself a little bit. But that's all up in the air. We haven't seen every single card from the upcoming Mega Set, Mega Evolution, so there could be some more good stuff in there. There could be some more good grass Pokemon. We never know. There could be some more good grass support. We're getting some indirect support for other stuff. For example, the fighting drink thing, I don't remember the name of it, gives a 30 damage boost to fighting Pokemon for the turn. That's still really good. It's supposed to be, you know, more of a support for Lucario EX, but it probably will see playing stuff like Garchomp. Removes the need to have Roserade and all that kind of stuff. We're also getting the stadium that just makes Gardevoir even better than it already is, because that was a good idea now, wasn't it, Pokemon? But yeah, I think this deck has a pretty good longevity. Plus, going into, you know, the Mega format, if we get dark Mega decks that become very prevalent, this deck is automatically a really good counter for that, especially if they have a grass weakness, because you can just instantly one-hit KO them and take 3 prize cards, so you're already halfway through the game. This deck is very cool. Very interesting. I think a lot of people will start picking it up more, especially if Marnie's Grimmsnarl becomes a lot more popular. I was expecting it to see a lot more success at NAIC 6, then 30th, then 43rd, then 57th, then 58th, then 64th. Yeah, the deck. A lot of people were picking up the deck. And, you know, it did do well, even at the recent, you know, Japan Champions League that we recently had, the Japan Championships 2025. It got 2nd and 5th and 18th and 21st, so it is a very, very popular deck. So I think if it becomes even more popular in the future, Toedscruel might be the choice to pick up to help counter it, and just to help counter, you know, stuff like Dragapult, stuff like Gardevoir, because that ability is very, very powerful, and we kind of need something like that for every deck, to be honest, not just Toedscruel. Can't really think of much else to say. Good protection ability effect, good attack, has really good draw support and really good consistency with its item cards and supporter cards and all that kind of stuff. Very, very strong deck that going into the Mega Evolution format could be even stronger if we get, you know, some dark prevalent Mega Evolution decks. Pretty good matchup. Or if deck lists start playing something like Venusaur to easily move around your energy, that could be really good, so on and so forth. I think the deck has pretty good longevity going into the future. However, it's not going to last forever because it is part of the G block, and the G block is our next line of cards to rotate next year, which will be around like March, April. So it will be legal for most of the tournaments next year up until like the European International Championships, which is in February again. I think it's like February 23rd. I'm pretty sure it's Valentine's Day weekend, which is a very weird time to have it. But yeah, the deck will be sticking around for maybe like a couple of months or two, and then unfortunately it will be gone. But hopefully in the time of its legality, it can do pretty well, maybe even get a first place finish. You never know. And that is it for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, what you think about Toedscruel EX. Have you picked up this deck? Will you be picking up this deck because you're someone like me who hates Marnie's Grimmsnarl, want to have an easy counter against it? Has everyone at your locals picked up Marnie's Grimmsnarl and you're just looking to upset everyone and just ruin everyone's day? Or maybe you're getting sick of Dragapult and you just want to have an easy matchup, an easy counter against it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, what you think about this deck, and also what you think about the deck going into the Mega Evolution format. That is certainly a topic to talk about. 3 prize Pokemon are coming back. Ethan's Typhlosion looking like the best deck at the moment. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, all of that nonsense, and I will see you in the next video. Whatever that may be. Take care.